get us started, that'd be great.
Sure. Thanks, Jill. Thanks for having us. I graduated from Georgia College in 2007. My major was psychology. My minor was management. I was in the honors program and in the leadership programs as well. And now I manage a volunteer and consultant operations team for CFA Institute, and we manage about 200 global volunteers that do work for our organization. Thanks.
Oh, Natalie, you're on mute.
2020 problems. I'm Natalie Sorto. I was a double concentration major in public relations and advertising with a minor in Spanish. I graduated in 2012, and I'm currently an ad sales account executive for both digital and cable for national brands in Atlanta.
Very good. Evan, you there?
I am here, and good afternoon, everybody. Excuse me for joining just by video, but I'm traveling here this week in Dallas as part of some restaurant travel with my day job at Chick-fil-A, but just delighted to be a part of such a special panel of distinguished alums. And so hello to my fellow alums and to the students that are joining. My name is Evankaranovich, and I graduated from Georgia College in 2012 with a degree in political science and a minor in criminal justice, thinking I would go to law school. Like many of us in 2012, there was a saturation of folks going to law school. And so I determined that I would be better to pursue maybe a different path and go to law school later. That has not yet happened, but I've pursued a career both in politics and government before joining just 4.5 years ago, Chick-fil-A Inc. And so I encourage everybody always to eat more chicken. Of course, we have one on campus, and that can fulfill all your Chick-fil-A needs, but serve in my current role as the lead advisor and strategic planning director for our chairman and CEO here in Atlanta. But this week, as I said, I'm in Dallas working with some future Chick-fil-A owner operators. It'll be actually one in Thibodaux, Louisiana, which is home to Nicholls State, so a great college campus, and then another in Victorville, California. So again, thanks for just giving me a little grace and joining by phone, but look forward to visiting together.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for joining us again and being here. So we'll go ahead and get started. We have some questions that we already have laid out. So I think we'll go ahead and we can keep the same order, Brandie, Natalie, and Evan, and I'll ask the question that we have. And then if you want to answer it, Brandie, and then Natalie and Evan, you guys can also just kind of have like an open dialogue. You can answer it. You guys can talk. If anybody has questions, we'll just kind of do it that way. So first question, as a recent graduate, how can you make yourself stand out among the competition?
And I assume you mean Jill on the job market, right?
Yes.
Is that's what you mean? Yeah. It's tough. This is a tough year to be a recent graduate, I think, or approaching graduation. So I know that dynamic is different. I would say one thing that everyone can do is have a strong professional social media presence, like a LinkedIn account. Follow the news, follow the trends in the business industry that you're interested in, and be actively engaged there. It's a way to grow a network. It's a way to set up your identity in a way that people can access when you do apply for jobs, and that you can be recruited in return from recruiters on a site like LinkedIn. Natalie, what do you think?
Yeah, I definitely say actively engaging with the people you know already, and maybe people that are in positions that you eventually want to be in. Right after graduation, I did a free unpaid internship where I went to a local TV station 3 days a week for free. And I could have just like checked off boxes and like gone in and like left for the day. But I tried to talk to everybody there, whether it was something directly related to events or planning, or if it was in a different department. And I think like once my internship ended, it gave me the opportunity to not just be a random person, but like they knew who I was. And so I think like really connecting with the people around you and kind of picking their brain That's really flattering to people anyway, but also it builds those connections. So when you are looking for a job, it's not just random person, like you've already built that rapport. And I think when I was there, I asked them if they would do like a mock interview or if I could just ask them questions and pick their brains. And they hadn't hired an intern until I got there and got hired after. But I think it was because I asked them that questions. They were really like, I think it was really refreshing for them to see that. And that was an advice that a professor gave me in one of my classes. So it worked out.
No, you both touched on some great points. I think I would put it, again, I sort of had, we had these questions in advance, so I'm not trying to hide from you students, but I would say quickly 3 things that I in my mind, I discussed, and I'd love for you to write these down if you have notes, but 3 things, exactly what both Brandie and Natalie talked about is kind of building a diverse network. I would say of both advocates and allies. Those that are not just in your industry, but or career field, but sort of beyond. The difference between an ally and an advocate are those that support you. Those are allies, but advocates are those that are going to fight for you. And we really want both. And so just thinking through who are those mentors, who are those colleagues that could do that when you're not in the room. Additionally, the second one I would say is build a diverse vocabulary. A diverse mindset through books, conversations. Now we're at a point that so much is virtual. You have access to so many different webinars, so many opportunities to grow and learn beyond just your sort of core academic studies. One book that I would, that has become a personal sort of mantra for me, if you will, was this, The Alchemist. And I think it's really a must read as you think about just the journey of life and the journey of your, what you're about to start in your professional career. I'd submit it to you as one that could really help you grow in your interpersonal leadership, but also your external. As we know, leaders are readers. And so I just remind everybody to never stop learning, doing it out of school just as much as in school. The books you read and the conversations you have really will shape your perspective. And we can't travel right now across the globe. So what are you doing to really just give yourself a different perspective? And then thirdly, building a diverse experience through your internship and leadership. Natalie spoke about this. It's less about titles, salaries, or roles right now. You're not going to be the CEO of an organization upon graduation, but what are you doing really to set yourself up for success, to learn and grow, and just earn the respect of those that are around you?
Awesome. Well, thank you guys for sharing that. There's some really great tips in there and advice. And I just will say, students, if you guys want to put your cameras on, feel free. I think some of you had them on and then it was kind of like they all went off. But again, you don't have to, but just feel free if you want to. Okay, next. Are you all working in the same field? I know, Evan, you mentioned you're not. You were a political science degree, but are you all working in the same field that you got your degree in?
Psychology is sort of a tough degree to, you could say anything relates to psychology, right? But I will say I went on to get my master's degree in industrial and organizational psychology. From there, I went directly into human resources, which is the perfect sort of working in your field. And then have gone there to sort of vendor management and now volunteer management. So it's all related to understanding people in business, which is why I was interested in the track that I was. So I would say yes, but not in a way that you might expect.
Yeah, so I was a double concentration major in PR and advertising, and I really actually enjoyed PR way more than advertising. And then whenever I had my internship, it was at a local station where I kind of, it was more PR and event planning, but I was adjacent to the advertising department, so I kind of learned a little bit about that. And that position was open when my internship ended. So it wasn't necessarily what I had intended. But it's what I ended up loving, and I still do. It's, I don't know what year, 9 years later, I'm still in it. So it's a super fast-paced industry, but I will say a lot of the stuff, like if you major in something and you like something else, there isn't necessarily anything holding you back from that, because at least in advertising, I know a lot of the people that I work with weren't necessarily advertising majors. One of them's like a culinary major. One of them, like they're just in really different, you get a lot of the training on the job, so you don't necessarily need it. For certain jobs, I know that you do, But I wouldn't let that deter you from at least trying. That's the diversity of thought that Evan was talking about, and some companies might appreciate that.
And Jill, again, to echo Natalie, I feel like I'm just saying amen here at the end of all the conversations, because we're all saying the same thing in many ways. The value of a liberal arts education is that there's so much transferability. There's so much value in what you're learning and the IQ that you're gaining through your academic programs. Another challenge that I would give, this is not just advice, but it's a little bit of a challenge throughout this conversation, that I would just I wish I had somebody tell me these things as I'm telling you all as students now, that to develop that EQ is going to be just as important as developing that IQ. Again, as we think about the transferability of leaders, we are in a very non-linear career path. Very few careers are you going to take and you say, well, you know, I'm going to start out here and then I'm going to stay in that same career. Even if you're an accountant, believe it or not, there are so many accountants that are now generalists later on in their career. And so I would challenge people to think less about specifics and more about range. There's a great book right now that's called Range, The Power of Generalists in the 21st Century. And I think I was very, at first, a little bit self-conscious about my life as a generalist. But I'm really seeing now that leadership and the flexibility of a skill set across an organization is a really key driver in success. And so think of yourselves not as subject matter experts. Maybe you are for a season, but think of yourselves as generalists. And again, try to gain as many valuable experiences and knowledges that you can to deploy at various seasons throughout your career.
Awesome. Did scholarships help fund your Georgia College education? And in your opinion, how important are scholarships, fundraising, and overall philanthropy at Georgia College? Can we speak to that a little bit?
Sure, absolutely. I received several scholarships. It certainly helped me. At Georgia College, I was a first generation college student, so I brought that in my experience as well. And as you think about philanthropy as a graduate and a recent or soon to be graduate of Georgia College, it can be tempting to think of that as Georgia College already asking you for something, and that's really not it. I want to share with you the perspective of the engagement opportunity that joining through philanthropy will offer you if you keep that connection with Georgia College. So when you begin your professional experience and your professional work life, a lot of things change, right? You have new networks. You're spending your time in different places. You're establishing yourself in your career. And parts of that can be isolating in the sense of your old networks not necessarily being present with you anymore. And so I would encourage you to think about the benefit that you're going to get back if you keep that philanthropic connection to Georgia College. So not only do we have to do that because others did that for us, but in giving a little bit, whatever that might be for you for the year, you're going to get updates from Georgia College. You're going to be invited to things. You're going to have these opportunities that keep you associated as an alumnus in a way that I think you will value just as much as your donation, whatever that might be, is to Georgia College.
Yeah, so I was a Hope Scholarship recipient all 4 years, but I should have applied to more scholarships and I didn't. It wasn't in my forethought for some reason. But I will say, you know, it opens up your finances later on, obviously, if you're not stuck in a ton of student loan debt. But I'll add to Brandie's message is like, I'm a firm believer in you get out of something what you put in. And so I think that goes with anything that you're involved with whether it's an organization or your school. It benefits not only the students that currently go to give back, but also, you know, the quality that your school or whatever is viewed as. So the better that we make Georgia College, or the efforts that we put in to make it a really great place to study and be, you know, the more that we get out of it, the more quality education you have, the more organizations we can offer, all the things just grow exponentially. And I'm a firm believer in just putting 100% into like whatever you're doing, because if you have a problem with something, or if you don't like the way something's done or whatever, like you have the power and you have a little bit of a say in changing that.
Again, amen. I think that one of the biggest factors that we should consider is the fact that you're on this call right now. Those of you that are on this call are active participants in Georgia College today. The biggest challenge and the biggest real hindrance that I saw of people graduating from college, and Brandie alluded to it, is how do you stay connected to a place that gave you so much, right? So yes, you gave in the sense of your time and your effort and some tuition money and some energy, but those people that are engaged on campus today are not going to graduate in May or in a fall commencement and just leave Georgia College. Engaged people stay engaged. And those of you on this call are engaged. And so I would challenge you to look at ways that you can remain engaged, not for, and even if you find value in giving to others, at the very least, I think it is a little bit of a selfish thing. That's a big part of your life, of how you started at Georgia College. And for the first time, I'll quote this of a friend of mine, Dr. Crawford Loritz, who reminds us that when we're born, we look like our parents. But when we die, we look like our choices. And so for many of you, Georgia College may have been your first pick. It may have been your second pick, or it may have not been a pick at all. But the very fact that you ended up there and that you're graduating with the degree there, that place represents you and you represent that place. And so I would just challenge you to stay involved, stay connected, and really being involved in young alumni councils, or as some of us are on the Alumni Board, or in various colleges, and just ways you will find a great deal of benefit from it. And I know that I know that the three of us on this call have as a whole, and all of us that are alums of institutions, we have a connection there because we made a connection there based on our 4 years or 5 years in some cases. But it's a big way for us to find value, and in the process, grow individually and collectively.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys for all sharing that. Next, do we have any tips for networking during the pandemic? I know this is kind of something new that everybody's been going through, but for these seniors especially, and just even juniors, sophomores, freshmen, anything we can share with them about that?
I'll just be honest, I am not missing the social reception networking events where we have 2 or 3 minutes to talk to individuals. I value more the relationship building side of networking. And I think there's actually a little bit more of an opportunity right now to capitalize on that. Because if you're reaching out for informational interviews, you're cold calling folks trying to get connected, you're reaching out to your parents, friends, your neighbor, different folks to learn about different career paths, you're immediately connected right into their office or their home office. You've got this one-on-one FaceTime that is uninterrupted by others around you, right? So most of the ways you're connecting now is virtually. And there's a benefit to that as well, I think. It can be a little more intimate, more dynamic. And if you prepare well for that and bring good questions, I think that could be a more fruitful conversation than the old ways of networking.
Yeah, I would just say engage. You know, it's hard. It's hard to be pandemic not seeing people, but we have so many means of connecting with people and reaching out to people that there's really no reason you can't. But I will say one of the things that I highly recommend is engaging when you don't necessarily need anything at the moment. I think it's pretty transparent when someone reaches out to you randomly when they need something, even though they don't know what's been going on in your life or what you've been up to or anything like that. They're like, hey, I want to sell you this skincare. Oh yeah, how you doing? But the skincare, you know, or whatever it is. And you're like, whoa. And so it's very transparent. And so I think just, you know, keeping connected to people and like touching base randomly, saying hi, checking in. If you want to pick somebody's brain, send them a $5 Venmo for coffee, like little things like that you can do in a technological age. That seems very natural and doesn't just seem like there's an ulterior motive to it. And I think that down the road, when you do need a recommendation or, you know, more info on something, a company or whatever it is, it won't seem so out of left field and like, you know, just unnatural. I think just maintaining naturally those relationships along the way will benefit you down the road. And I will also add this little tidbit. If you put somebody down as your recommendation, be sure to ask them beforehand. I've probably been put down at my company like 10 times for a recommendation and maybe like one time I was asked. And that's like a surefire way for me to be like, I really don't recommend that person because they didn't even reach out to me to ask me for a recommendation or to put them down as a reference. I didn't even know they were applying. So just the simple courtesy of reaching out to whoever it is you're putting as a reference or whatever goes a long way.
Natalie, if I can just jump in to add, that's a really great point that you made about cultivating your network when you don't just need something. And I want to say I've learned that lesson the hard way several times, to where I got to the point where I would put on my calendar just a list of people that I wanted to reach out to quarterly. And it was a recurring appointment because I would find that when I needed something, it was the same, 5 or 6 people that I would go to. And I would always be like, I wish I had called them recently, sent them, a holiday card, whatever it might be. And so it's a really good advice.
Yeah, and I'll frame it this way. I'll use a Chick-fil-A analogy, for example. We base and we pride ourselves on developing relationships over transactions. And that is the key to success. In this instance, LinkedIn can be a powerful connector, but if you're doing it with the purpose of a transaction versus a relationship, you're going to fail every time. And so to the points that both Brandie and Natalie made, be specific. Ask very intentional ways that you can show up in that relationship, that those individuals you're reaching out to will often be just as interested in what you have going on. And so think of a mentor-mentee relationship as a relationship, but it's one that goes both ways. It's not just one that is one-sided, and not to be afraid of that you too have something to offer.
Wow, those were great. So a lot of these tips, aren't obviously just related to the pandemic, but so that segues into the next question. Just talk about some tips in general to help with the transition from college to career.
I wrote down a few things pieces of advice that I give to psychology students that sometimes Dr. Gillis will send my way to chat about careers. One of which is, I find it very valuable even now for myself to read job postings that are out there, that are listed. We don't always know the jobs that we're interested in because we don't know they exist yet. We don't know what those titles are. We don't know the difference in an entry-level posting and a lower level, a higher level posting. And I find the best way to learn about that is to read what's out there. Just Google your intended industry, right? And then see what else is available. By reading those, even if you don't intend to apply for them, you can learn a lot about, everybody keeps saying this skill, I should figure out how to get that skill. You can see common themes across marketing and psychology or whatever your area is. So I find that really helpful to sort of find a career path when you're not quite sure exactly where it is that you want to go. And I would say, especially for the women who are listening, when in doubt, apply. So it's common practice that men, if they qualify at all, even a little, will apply for a job. And females, for some reason, if we don't hit every mark of the application and every job requirement, we think we're not qualified. And our male counterparts are throwing themselves in the pool and getting the jobs, and we're not. So certainly apply. I think interviewing for a job that you're maybe even kind of not sure you're interested in is great practice. That's where you have your hiccups and start to get a sense of yourself and how you handle yourself in an interview. So don't be afraid of jumping into that process to learn from it as you go.
That was actually on my list of things to suggest was going to be apply. Like, especially at the beginning when you're first transitioning from college to a career, it's like the best time to have an excuse to not know things, right? You're like fresh off of college and you don't like know much technically. Like, you could use all of that to your advantage and really pick people's brains without someone like, rolling their eyes at you being like, wow, this person's been in this industry for this long and they don't know that question. Like, you don't know anything. So not, you don't know anything, you know a lot of things, but you know what I mean? It's a good, like, place to be able to ask as many questions as you want without like annoying anybody. And I think, maintaining those relationships, I think I'll echo what Evan said. Relationships are going to be key, not just in your career, but in life. And I think maintaining those relationships. I was a PR major, wanted to go into PR, but ended up in advertising. But I worked at a television station, but I knew the cameraman and the anchor woman and the woman in charge of philanthropy and like all these different departments that I wasn't necessarily going to go into, but I was really interested. I knew that they were 10, 15, 20 years my senior, or however long, and I could learn something, anything from their experiences in the real world. And I think, so after I got my job there, I worked at Univision at first. And then 6 months down the road, they actually ended up laying off a bunch of higher ups and new hires. And I was actually laid off within 6 months of having my first like big girl job. And I was like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? Like, how am I going to get a new job? I know nothing. I haven't been in this business for that long. But surprisingly, like I just got on it. You have to be on it like all the time, even if you do have a job and don't foresee yourself getting laid off. Just having those connections. I was able to reach out to like so many people that I just met in social situations that just happen to be in the business, or even people in your program in mass comm. I reached out to a bunch of people I knew that were kind of in a similar spot. And I applied to a bunch of different places and had 3 offers within a week, so not burning bridges, I think, is key too. Like, especially in advertising. And I'm sure this applies to other industries, but everyone kind of knows each other, right? So whatever you do professionally in one job or one industry probably might not stay there. If you're putting people down for references or whatever, people kind of like know your name or know what you've done or whatever it is. So you always want to just be great, like how I think somebody mentioned earlier, like when you walk out of a room, you want somebody to advocate for you and speak highly of you instead of the opposite. And it stinks if you're in the opposite, but I think just working hard to combat that and putting your best foot forward in everything you do, so nothing comes back on you.
Natalie hit on something important that I hope everybody heard, is this idea that good people doing good things are always taken care of, and that's not always the case. And Natalie, in that example, she just told us she was a quality applicant, a quality worker, but because of the circumstances was not able to continue on. So this idea that you need to lean on your relationships, but you also need to lean on yourself. One of the biggest things I would encourage everybody to do is think through again who you are and what you want. That's something that was very rarely actually asked in college, is that what are the interpersonal qualities that you want to have, and then recognizing those vulnerabilities that you don't, or that you do have and that you don't currently possess but want to possess. One area that I would caution everybody with on this call, and this is something I wish somebody had told me about, is imposter syndrome. I've seen this more in recent generations. I myself and my own colleagues have seen this and have heard from HR professionals that this remains an issue really across industries with recent graduates. And Natalie touched on a little bit in saying that, you are not the smartest person in the room, but you do have something to contribute. As a recent grad, you have new valuable skills, knowledge, the latest and greatest, if you will, but know when to learn and know when it can be used most effectively as a successful employee. It's not about what you know, but how you use your influence to make it known. And I just think that's a cautionary tale I would remind everybody, is that you have skills, you have assets, but knowing, again, going back to this idea of EQ versus IQ, knowing and picking up cues as to when to activate those is going to be essential for you.
Evan, I wrote down something similar to bring. I'm sorry, Natalie. I wrote down something similar that I just want to say. The way I wrote down what you just said, Evan, was find the balance of the education that you bring into the room from your degree, because that's new information, that's new insight that you have, and balance that with your humility and your curiosity to learn from the people around you. And I see the difference in that when I work with interns at our organization, young people. It's a balance of feeling like you're bringing enough to the table, and also just being vulnerable enough to be open to what you can learn from those around you. Sorry, Natalie, go ahead.
No, you're exactly right, Brandie. It's this idea that you can teach a skill, but you can't teach the character, the charisma, and the courage. And that's very hard. This idea, we talk at Chick-fil-A, it's character, competency, and charisma are sort of our 3 C's. Those are not necessarily trained. I can teach you how to drop waffle fries. I can teach you how to make a chicken sandwich. I can't teach you those other soft skills that are becoming ever more essential in order to differentiate you. And I think, again, going back to this liberal arts education, you all may just hear that as a buzzword, or you may right now not even fully understand it. Your parents might not even fully understand what a liberal arts education does, but it's exactly that. It's giving you exposure to so much, but then allowing you to practice those soft skills that can be real differentiators for you. Sorry, Natalie, I think I interrupted you too.
No, you're good. You're good. No, I was just going to add like to imposter syndrome a little bit and just being yourself, and balancing that curiosity with what's special about you. You know, I think one of the questions was, how do you differentiate yourself without going overboard? Everyone's different, right? And so like, I'm a very like grab the bull by the horns kind of girl. Like I'll assert myself where I need to, or speak up in meetings when, you know, they call for it. But I think a very important thing is to be self-aware, and kind of gauging what works for other people. Like, yes, that might be my personality, right? But to others, that might be overbearing or intimidating, or insert whatever adjective here. So just being aware of other people's body language and your interaction with them, because yes, you should stand on your own, your personality, your skills, whatever you've learned in college so far. And someone's going to appreciate those skills. You don't have to like mold yourself to be somebody else, but just being aware of others' personalities and strengths and comfortabilities, I think is good too. I know there was this guy at my job when he first started, and he came in guns blazing. I did too. When I first like started my internship, I came in with coffee, donuts for the whole office. I didn't have money at the time, charged it to my credit card. And, you know, that day it was like the buzz, like people would stop by my desk and be like, oh, are you the new girl who brought the donuts? And I'd be like, yeah, that's me. What's up? And so, you know, that might not work for somebody else. And who knows, maybe that rubbed somebody wrong. That was like, oh my gosh, she's trying too hard. But that's me. But there was this one guy at my job who would go to everybody's cube at like 8:30 in the morning, which most people haven't even had their coffee by then, you know? So he would come in and just be super high energetic, and people would be still taking their eye boogers out of their eyes, and like, they're like, chill, like relax, you know? So he didn't have that self-awareness to know like, hey, maybe it's too early, maybe a little bit more passive approach while you read your audience, but also still be true to yourself. Just kind of like balancing that with seeing like the personalities around you and what might work and what might not.
Awesome. Thank you guys for sharing that. All right, I have 2 more questions on here, and then we'll open it up to the students if you guys have any questions. And so, how did you guys find your first job?
So I graduated with my master's in 2009, so smack in the recession, right? I think I applied, I'm not joking, I think 50 or so places, and I was looking, I mean, anything that remotely was in the realm of anything I wanted to do. I was really fortunate to land at the organization I'm still at, so I've been there 12 years. And I was in human resources, and that was spot on, but I was in a very low level position, the lowest level, like the assistant level. And I thought that it was insulted, right? I felt insulted. I had a master's degree, right? I felt like I should be, you know, making $80,000 a year and in a higher level role, right? So that was a humbling experience and a humbling time, 2009. But I like, kind of like Natalie said, I came out guns blazing, and I listened and learned and worked my way up and across and around the organization. And I've been really happy with the company that I work for. And one of the things I wanted to point out, which is, Jill, not exactly what you're asking, but I wanted to say in that, I think sometimes there's a pressure to find the perfect fit for yourself. You hear people say things like, find the job you would do for free, right? Find the job you would still do if you had won the lottery. That's a lot of pressure to put on your job search, and especially your first job search. And I always encourage people to think about all the other steps that you might need to get to whatever that job is, and that your entire happiness almost, that's a little soft term, if your entire happiness doesn't have to come from one job, right? So if you don't feel completely fulfilled in what you do from 9 to 5 or 8 to 5, volunteer doing other things that make you happy, right? There are we all find a different balance in our lives, and you don't have to put that pressure on yourself, especially starting out, to find the absolute perfect fit, making the perfect amount of money, serving people in the way that you are hoping to. Give yourself a little grace and space to sort that out over time.
So I actually, I don't know if anyone's a mass comm major, but you become really close to your teachers. And one of my professors actually gave me the recommendation for my internship at Univision. And that's where I got my first job after my internship was over. But again, like when I went in there, I was like, I'm gonna get a job here. And they're like, no, literally no intern has ever gotten a job here. And the whole time we've had this internship program, whatever. And so that was really deflating. So I was like, how am I gonna, but again, I spoke to all the like directors and I was like, can I pick your brain? Can you interview me? Like I did whatever I could to learn. And then 6 months after I was laid off, I had like random connections from all these places. And one of them was a company that had worked at the events in our like local events. And it was like a nonprofit, and I could have gone in that direction too. So it's just, you just never know what kind of connections you're going to make. And whenever you're in need of a job, like that's, I think, where you're going to probably 80% of the time find it a lot more easily by knowing somebody.
Grow where you're planted, right? And so this idea, I want to underscore it, and I don't want it to seem like you shouldn't be striving, but you can thrive where you are. But that's a decision. I think all of us, again, I go back to this idea of imposter syndrome. We all wanted, Brandie, to your point, we all graduated and it felt like, wow, I've got something different. Well, in reality, you have something that a lot of people have. What you don't have is, again, going back, who are you and how do you do what you do? Are key differentiators that, candidly, we haven't developed when we're, 21 to 25. Our brain doesn't even stop fully developing to a certain degree around 25. Brandie may know the specifics around the psychology of it. I am not the scientist. I was a political scientist, but that doesn't mean I know science. And so I just would remind everybody, again, strive, but also thrive where you are. You're going to look back and be so thankful for the foundation that you've laid for yourself in that early internship or introduction into a career. And don't think of it as, again, a forever thing. This is a growth. Where you're planted may change, but your decision to thrive where you're planted is a decision that you have to make that day.
Great. Last question. Anything you guys wish you had done differently in college that you want to share?
Gosh, that's a tough one. I really am not one to have regrets. I feel like I self-evaluate a lot, and I make choices that I carefully, I guess. And so one thing I could have done differently, I was involved in a lot of organizations and spread myself shallow and wide rather than deep into different things that I was doing. So I certainly could have approached that a little bit differently. But I loved my time at Georgia College, and it means a lot to me still. So I enjoyed my time there.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat as Brandie. I try to look at life without regrets, especially if you're happy where you are now. Like, I feel like I'm in a good spot. So who knows if you would have changed something or done something different if you wouldn't end up in the same place. I will say the one thing I would probably change would have been to be more involved in the local community. In my time in college, while I was there, I worked at El Tequila, so I can go back and visit the restaurant owner from there, and I know them pretty well, and some professors I can go back and visit. But I think, to Evan's point, to like thrive where you're planted, like just caring about where you are and where you're situated is really important. And I think I was so focused on school and extracurriculars and sorority stuff and whatever, but I think I would have probably given more back to the city of Milledgeville while I was there.
Yeah, I too. I think the healthy tension I live in. I was a volunteer firefighter in Milledgeville for all 4 years, and to Natalie's point, really valued that just to get to know where I was and the community that surrounded us. But at the same point, I was also faced with this tension. I was so hyper focused on campus, doing so much with my fraternity to that point. And even just that I candidly, I failed to see the greater world around me. And again, I think interestingly enough, as I've gotten into business and just beyond, taking advantage of a study abroad program was never something that was on my mind because I was so micro, that I didn't really take the time to see the macro impact around me, even though I wasn't fully naive. I mean, I watched the news, I read newspapers, but just in the sense of experiencing it. And I know it was a financial cost that I didn't really think I could take on at the time, and a time thing that I think if I chose this, I was going to forfeit that. You can do both, and you can do it in a way that, yes, it may take a little bit of financial resource and a little bit of time, but those perspectives early and often will shape you in a really positive way. And that way, again, we're very multidimensional as people. All of us as humans are supposed to be multidimensional. We're not supposed to be sort of a one-track mind. And so just getting out, exploring, gaining new perspectives, translating those experiences to you today, or maybe those would infer who you want to be tomorrow. And so a big thing, I don't know if I don't like the word regret, but a challenge I would ask everybody is, how are you exposing yourselves to new and different? And often an easy way to do that would be through intentional international perspectives and just this understanding of the growing globalization around us. And that's for-profits, industry, nonprofits, governments. I mean, that really touches everybody. So having that perspective would really be a good challenge for everyone, I think.
Yeah, thank you guys for sharing all that. I guess right now we will open up the floor. Do any of you students have any questions for Brandie, Natalie, or Evan?
Hi, I had a question. I was just wondering how leadership has played a role in you guys' careers or lives or just time after college.
Anybody else want to go first? I've answered a lot first. I'm happy to sit it out for a minute.
I would say in everything. I think, gosh, the experiences that, both Evan and I were in SGA together. We were both leaders in our fraternity sororities. Like, I was the president of this and involved in that. And I think it wasn't just a box checker necessarily for me. I really, again, wanted to do the best I could and make organizations the best that they could be and learn as much as I could. And I think those skills of, dealing with people that you might not agree with, being in an organization with different personalities, different viewpoints, definitely helps you navigate the real world, or I hate using that term, but your career life world. The transition of dealing with people wasn't a big one because I had already done it for 4 years, different personalities. And I think also just differentiating yourself from others. There's a lot of followers in the world, and we need followers. Not everybody can be a leader, right? But I think, especially when it comes to going out for jobs and setting yourself apart, someone who's willing to stand on their own 2 feet and having that confidence of being able to speak in front of others and interacting with new people, I think I learned a lot of those skills being a leader and being involved in different organizations in undergrad.
Jill, could you tell me who asked that question?
It was Lizzie.
Lizzie, could you tell me, are you a current leader on a campus activity or involved on campus in some way, a current leadership role?
I don't have a leadership role currently, but I'm in the leadership program.
Oh, great. Well, I would encourage you, again, as your sort of experience, college is the place to experiment with hopefully a lot of healthy things, leave the unhealthy things for somebody else, or try to grow from their mistakes. But I would say from a leadership perspective, now's the time to experiment. Leading your peers will be probably the hardest thing that you will ever do. I found it to be the case because they're your friends, they're your colleagues. The hardest job, and thankfully I was not it, nose goes on this for me, but was president of a fraternity or a sorority. That to me felt like the greatest obstacle and liability possible. The moment that you were elected president of an organization like that, you were both the most popular and the most dreaded person in that organization. It's very, very tough to be a peer leader. What I would translate that as you graduate, what I would translate that to is not necessarily leadership. I would call it influence. As we've all discussed, you're not going to be the CEO. That's just a fact, unless you start your own company. So I'm not here to burst dreams or bubbles. I am here to burst bubbles, but you can have that dream eventually of being a CEO. But I would challenge everybody on the call to see how you can influence, see how you can lead through influence, not lead by position or title or salary, because the likelihood of you being able to do that immediately after college is fairly low. But you can lead by influence. And that would be a challenge I would give to everybody on this call. It's a way that I've found myself being able to do increasingly well within whatever organization I've been a part of. And that goes, again, a lot to both the IQ and the EQ components of how do you connect with people, but how do you use your knowledge? How do you connect people to put, get your foot in the door, but you use that knowledge and that skill set that you've developed in order to get through the door. And I think that's just an important difference.
Yeah, those are great points, Natalie and Evan. Your character is with you forever, and you're building that right now.
And the answer is yes.
Hold on, can I mute Evan? You're building your own character. It stays with you forever, and leading from the seat that you're in is a great point that Evan made. In my organization, we call it leading without authority, and that's something you have the capability to do at any point. Building your own values, building your own ethical standards, and sticking to those, whatever role you are in, is important. I also believe that I don't really subscribe to that you wear different hats at different times. I think you're an entire person wherever you are, right? And so, being that person, and being your authentic self at work, at home, in your volunteer organizations, wherever it may be, defining who you are as an individual and representing yourself well, I think is the foundation of how you will build your leadership character.
And I'd like to add too, everyone's leadership character, to quote Brandie, is going to be different, right? So I work in sales and I have a specific type A assertive personality, but there are other account executives that are soft-spoken and might not jump and speak at a meeting full of 100 people. But we need everybody. We don't just need everyone that's like my personality or their personality. Everyone, there's a beauty in having a collective unit of different types of leaders and people, and not having everybody be the same.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned those different styles, Natalie, because when you get out of college and you go to different jobs, you realize that very quickly, that your boss at your old job is not going to lead the same as, the situation that you're in now. So that becomes very evident. So thank you for pointing that out. Any more questions, guys? What are some other ones? Feel free to put them in the chat too if your audio isn't working or if you're more comfortable with that.
And I would even ask maybe a question. This may a question answer session from us to them. I even think as an alumni, I would love to know from a student's perspective, what can we do? We've talked about a lot of things of, maybe mentor-mentee relationships virtually, or I know we've done a lot of resume building. What is helpful for you all as you interact? And again, building your network, and a natural place to begin that network would be with alumni. What are some things that you all feel could be helpful for us to engage with you intentionally for? Not all at once.
I know I already spoke, but I would just say even doing things like this where we got the chance to hear from you guys and hear your experience and hear your advice and stuff like that, just simple things like that, or even like you said, a mentor-mentee program is already very helpful.
Yeah, going off of what you just said, I really appreciate actually having real alumni to telling us like their experience, especially when it's more recent. So we kind of get like a feel of the real world and what to expect, what to do to make ourselves stand out.
Brandie and Natalie, I think that's the nicest comment we can get today is that we're recent college grads. That
That's
makes
exactly
us feel
what I was
really
thinking.
young. I love that.
Oh my
I
God.
was just thinking, I think I've realized the other day that I'm at the age where I don't know the like the fact that I'm out of tech, like I don't know the new things. I'm like, okay, I've reached a different age bracket now. Like there's a whole younger generation that knows so much more. Oh.
Any other questions?
Let me just say to Mackenzie to remember that perspective as you're an alumna too, because you will be that recent graduate. You will be that person that's just gone through that experience, and find a way to give that back to Georgia College students early on, because I'm aging out of being that current graduate, right? I have a different perspective I can bring, but you're right that recent graduates really, that perspective can be so helpful when you're a student. So remember that in a couple of years.
And Brandie, I too would echo that in a way. I just want to say thank you all as students for making us look good. Your academic performance, your extracurricular performance continues to make Georgia College look even better than when we left it. And so I think the intentionality that you all are doing by being on this call, again, you're probably death by Zoom as well as for all of us as alums, but just the investments you all are making on campus make Georgia College stand out, which in turn, any of us that have a piece of paper either hanging on our wall or sitting in our closet equally is valuable. And so just thanks for the work that you're doing on campus to continue that same spirit as hopefully we left it in your capable hands when we graduated. So thank you.
All right, are there any more from either the alums or students? Julia, Mazmi, anybody before we sign off? We have a few more minutes.
Thank you guys. I'm not a current student. I am not necessarily a recent alum either, but the advice that you guys provided, it was nice to hear once again, because it's still very relevant 6-7 years into your career. Especially if you're talking about transitioning to a different role or to a different, what is the word that I'm looking for? Career path altogether. So it was very refreshing to hear that, and a great reminder. So thank you for all of your advice.
Julia, there's power in the pivot, and so not being ashamed that a pivot will come and affect you positively. So I think there's value in that, and to embrace it. Yeah,
I agree. That's awesome.
And to echo off of Julia, I want to thank our panelists today for taking the time to talk to our students and all of the students that joined in this conversation. If any of you do end up having questions for the panelists after we leave and you think, oh my gosh, I forgot to ask this, feel free to reach out to us and we can ask our panelists to respond and give you some feedback. I don't know if you all have Jill's email, but a quick way to get in touch with us is just emailing alumni@gcsu.edu, and then I can help connect you with these alums for any follow-up.
Moves me, thank you. I would also encourage everybody to go to LinkedIn right now. It's the platform most of you probably have. Just a quick connect, and would love to stay connected and see your successes in the future.
Yeah, thank you for putting that out there, guys. It's a great opportunity for you to go connect on LinkedIn and stay up to date with everybody. Again, yeah, you can email the alumni account too, or you can respond to me. I know I sent you all the reminder link today, so do stay in touch. And yes, once again, I will echo this big thank you. We really appreciate it, Evan, Brandie, and Natalie. I hope you all students enjoyed this and saw it beneficial. Hopefully we can continue to do things like this and then maybe one day in person again. So thank you guys all so much for your time today, and yep, have a good rest of your day.
Go Bobcats. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.